Oh, Minnie, I hear a clicking sound.
Yes, Henry?
Is it your old broken heart, men? It's time now for the Down Atheist podcast episode.
Yeah, no, never mind all that rubbish. You got a new bloody sponsor, Darby.
Yeah, I know. Don't remind me.
Right, come on, turn the bloody music off. I'll be calling the shots now that I'm paying the piper.
Yeah, Nev, we got a really special guest on the show today, though. We have Jamie DeWolf, who is the, well, I guess you'd say the estranged great-grandson of Mr. L Ron Hubbard. And Jamie's mission, I believe, is to set the world right and to bring the people away from the Scientology, the naughty Scientology, you know. And he'll be here very, very soon.
Oh, but come on, now, you've got time to play me. Come on, play me jingle. Come on, ching, ching. Time is money, son. A number 1, a number 2, and a 3, and a 4. If your bathroom's on the blink, don't squeeze it down the sink. When I'm pumping out your dunny, I'm in the land of milk and honey. I'll take away your waste, and I'll do it at great haste. Whole Nev Septic Sucking Services. Is the crapper all backed up? Well, you found a piece of luck. She's got a big tank as my Sheila, my beloved Bedford truck. I'll remove that nasty stink much faster than you think. Call Nev Septic Sucking Services. I discount for cash. I'll have you flushing in a flash. Don't clench up your ass, 'cause all things come to pass. If it's lumpy or it's ruddy, I'm the man who'll fix your nutty. Call Nev Septic Sucking Services. Watson versus Grothy in elevator gate. Both crack the shits and it don't smell too great. The Pope or Desmond Tutu can find themselves in doo-doo. Call Nev Septic Sucking Services. That's Nev Septic Sucking Services. You need Nev Septic Sucking Services. Oh, Nev Septic Sucking Services. Oh, it sucks to be me.
Oh, dear, I did. It sucks to...
the plunger for you skeptics with septics.
Oh, skeptics. It sucks to listen to the commercial.
Yeah, we'll get used to it, son. I've got a lot of change in me pocket. Jingle, jingle, jingle.
Yeah, that's another thing. Do you mind taking your boots off before you come into the little room here? Because, I mean... Oh, man, you really stink this place up.
No, well, I wiped them on the mat, didn't I? What more do you bloody want?
Yeah, that's another thing. You killed that mat. It was my wife putting that mat in our washing machine the other week that actually broke the thing. All right, so boots off. That's enough now.
High and mighty, aren't we? Thought you said you had an interview to do.
Yes, we do. We're going to interview Jamie DeWolf right now. In fact, just after this bit that goes, bit. Hello? Hello, Jamie.
Yes, hey.
How you going there? It's Rob calling from Australia. Oh, I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing just fine.
Now, I first saw you when you were posted to Facebook, or posted to YouTube, I should say, with your stand-up routine, where I first saw that you were the great-grandson of Mr. L Ron Hubbard, and then the other night I saw a CBS News thing where you were interviewed. Talking about your experiences. Now, for the listeners, just before we go into the fact that you are, is it correct to assume that you're the estranged grandson of L Ron Hubbard? Would that be correct?
Estranged, I guess it would be a good word for it. I would say defiant is the word I would prefer. I would say my grandfather, who was L Ron Hubbard Jr. So my great-grandfather is L Ron Hubbard. My grandfather's L Ron Hubbard Jr. And L Ron Hubbard Jr. was definitely estranged. When I was born, L Ron was already in hiding at that point, so very few people even knew his actual location, even in the Church of Scientology. There was a lot of government branches that were actually actively hunting for him, so he pretty much vanished off the map. And at that point, nobody saw him. And so for most of my life, I never met the man. I did know my grandfather very, very well, and saw him constantly all the time, every Christmas, Thanksgiving, and so forth. And he was the one who had a huge war with his father for almost half of his life.
Okay, so that's your grandfather. He's the one who fled. Now, I was going to say we'll talk about your showbiz stuff, but seems you've jumped into it there. So, okay, so he was the son of L Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, and he was also the brother. Was it Quentin who was gay? Wasn't he estranged?
That was another son of his from his other wife.
Okay, because he had a few wives, didn't he, L Ron Hubbard? He had a few.
Yes. He is a hustler. Yes. Yeah. And so that was Quentin. Another son.
Okay, so
L Ron Hubbard Jr. was pretty much his first child.
Okay, now when you said he went into hiding, I mean, he had government agencies actually chasing him. Did L Ron Hubbard Sr. have that much pull that he could organise that sort of thing?
To go into hiding?
Who helped him go into hiding? Was it the government officials, or the government officials were chasing him because of L Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah, there was an entire operation that involved actually infiltrating a lot of government agencies in the later 70s called Operation Snow White. And this is an operation that actually L. Ron Hubbard's second wife went to jail for and actually had to serve time along with a lot of top-ranking members. And though nothing was officially charged to L. Ron, he managed to skate a lot of it because the church and the cult insulated him from a lot of prosecution. But they certainly had a lot of questions for him.
Right now,
a lot of countries had a lot of questions for him.
Now, that was Mary, was it, who went to jail for him?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yes.
That was and she never ever dropped him in it, did she? She basically did her time and was still loyal.
Yes, correct. Yeah, and at that point, L. Ron was incredibly skittish of ever being seen in the public eye. He stopped giving interviews. He actually wanted to give off the illusion that he was stopped controlling the church. And he knew that he was insulated if he was just acting as if he was a guiding light, but not that he was actually running the day-to-day, which actually he still was. And
was that the time that he was just floating around on the ocean on the free winds? Was that right? Is that when he just wasn't part of any nation, or was that at a different time?
In that same era. I mean, basically, he was escaping a lot of extraditions. He was escaping a lot of countries by being on this ship, traveling around for almost a decade. And then when he finally landed on the United States shore, it was in Clearwater, which was a city that they pretty much devoured and bought up and completely took over. And that was immediately when he went into hiding. And he stayed in hiding for about the next 10 years.
Yeah, that is amazing how you could sort of land. He was almost like a kind of like Captain Cook coming to Australia and set sail, planted a flag, and somehow managed to take over the actual whole village. Because prior to that, he'd been in England, wasn't it? Grinstead or Greens, wasn't he? He'd set up a base in England before he came back.
Yeah, I mean, basically everywhere that he had a very, conquistador almost sort of mentality. He would try to land and try to just take over and consume as much as possible, and he sort of kept creating these outposts, and with the outposts and the churches and the missions, that there were basically also, safe houses and his own kind of sort of security forces handling it, and they would identify opposition and their critics, and they would just sort of take over. And I mean, they certainly have made several cities in America, like Los Angeles and Clearwater, Florida. They're sort of spiritual meccas. But a lot of that is just by the sheer force of having the money to be able to consume as much real estate as possible.
So at that stage, I wouldn't have thought his following was that big, but it must have been quite substantial for him to have that amount of money. Like at that point there, do you know roughly what he would have been worth in terms of sort of cash?
Anybody can only guess, because he was one of the few people that actually understood. All the money went up. And so, I mean, easily millions. Some people have even estimated even more. I mean, when they landed in Clearwater, they bought 2 hotels and paid from something like $18 million for combined, and paid for it in cash. And the fact that the church is still around, even decades after he's dead, is a testament to how much money he actually made when he was alive. And he got away with all of it. I mean, once they were able to win their war against the IRS, all that money is untouchable. They're able to protect it. They're able to reinvest it. And there's been a lot of murky financial dealings, of course, over the years, all sort of offshore accounts, all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of internal members who have certainly left the church recently that claim that they have a better understanding of how much money the church actually has. But I mean, we're talking millions, hundreds of millions potentially.
It's absolutely staggering. I am quite amazed. I mean, I know in Australia when I was younger, the church used to put out billboards on sidewalks, as we don't call them here, footpaths, but where they would say, "A job today, come and work here." And eventually I think the Department of Trade and Labour clamped down on them. But basically they would get people to come and work for basically nothing. So I guess the money that generates from when people work for you for nothing is quite staggering. So when your grandfather, Ron Jr., escaped, how did he escape? What did he sneak out in the quiet of night? How did he plan his getaway to get away from the cult?
According to Jerry Armstrong, who was a guy that I spoke to in depth when I was in Ireland, that he claims that basically they set up safe houses immediately. They set up pseudonyms. They also created short stories where he would spread word that he was about to maybe return to New York, and he wasn't going to New York at all, simply to throw everybody off the trail. And at that point, he also had several people who would protect his location with doing dead drops and doing phone calls and having people meet, at specific phone booths and restaurants, and very sort of mafia-esque hush-hush. And that was a lot of it is just him constantly staying on the move. He had a couple of handlers who traveled with him and protected him and to make sure that no one could actually get any kind of direct access to him. Similar to what, a mafia boss or anybody else would do if they were on the run, which is that you have a couple intermediaries who basically handle your business, and everybody's running under the public guise of that nobody knows where he is.
And they were people that had also become disenchanted with Scientology, were they?
That's correct, yes. A lot of those people are also out or have just generally been silent around the whole matter. Jerry Armstrong was one of the guys he was one of his personal secretaries and was actually the one that discovered one of these secret safe houses and discovered a secret stash that had all of L Ron Hubbard's real documents, his military records, his school transcripts, and he was actually able to communicate a message to L Ron, who was in hiding at that point, and asking him for his approval to create and write and research this entire biography, thinking that he had the evidence that would prove that L Ron was not a con man, that he's not a liar, and that they could finally prove conclusively to the world that he was what he said he was, which is, one of the greatest thinkers and visionaries of the last century. And he was actually a devout Scientologist at this point.
Right.
And L Ron had been so lost in Fantasyland and been so cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs for so long and had lived in his own kind of, completely fictitious world where all of these lies after time had just sort of, became truth to him and became solidified, that he actually said yes. And he actually said, yes, use it and write my biography. And then, of course, as Jerry started really digging through this stash, he realized that all of it was confirming that he had lied about almost everything. That about everything was either an outright lie or was an utter gross distortion. And when sort of word got out of his discoveries, then he himself had to flee as well. But I do know that he was able to communicate messages to him at that time, and that was also why my grandfather, L Ron Hubbard Jr., was such a problem, such a thorn in their side, is because he basically proclaimed to the world, well, I think my dad is dead, and I want his money, know, and that was a huge issue with the church because they had to basically prove that he was not dead, but at the same time toe this very delicate line of also pretending that they didn't know, where he was, but have to be able to prove himself as well. And so that was a really difficult thing for them, and it became a huge issue.
Well, it is an extremely paranoid sort of organization, that's for sure.
Incredibly so.
I did want to find out how you were told about this as a child, but just things you were talking about, L Ron Sr., because we've all heard the stories that he was a wonderfully decorated war hero. He was this, he was that, he was all things to all men, went up past the belt of wherever it is and met with aliens and all this sort of stuff and mighty Xenu. But in your opinion, what do you think made L Ron Hubbard Sr., the founder of Scientology, what made him be that person? Do you know much of his childhood? What really shaped him to go on to be this, quite frankly, amazing cult leader? Do you know the real story of?
I think overall, just in general, I mean, we can talk about various aspects of his childhood and so forth. But I mean, so much of it is so distorted over time that even digging through what actually happened, what actually was, it was certainly a lot more humble than anything else. But I think that at the end is that this man had the hungriest ego that the century has ever seen, that everything that he had failed at in life, he was able to recreate through lies, through fiction, through these tales and through manipulation to become that same character. That he was discharged from the military. So later he becomes a war hero who was basically machine gunned in the back and, you know, basically declared dead twice. You know, that he got an S in his only nuclear physics class and barely showed up and flunked out of it. And then he later on tells everyone he was a nuclear physicist. You know, that he was a dogfighter pilot, that he studied at the feet of Indians, that he went and traveled the Far East and traveled with shamans. I mean, if you go to the L. Ron Hubbard life exhibit in Los Angeles and you actually go on a tour of this man's life, it's so ridiculous and so absurd that it makes you realize that if you did actually believe all of this, then yeah, you'd be defiant. You're like, this is one of the greatest human beings that have ever lived. But I think the fact that he constantly was spinning, it wasn't small truths. It was like constant manipulations and distortions of his own past, and it was hiding a lot of who he actually was. But by the end of his life, he had become that. He had become this larger-than-life character who had an entire army surrounding him. He had his own shifts. He had people that completely believed in everything he was and believed that he was this godlike source, you know, just inhabiting the human body. And, I mean, I think that he would be absolutely delighted to know that people are still warring over his name and warring over who he really was. Because I think at the end of the day is that he was a carnivorous ego. You know, I mean, he was a con man. I think it was more than just the money for him. He certainly at some point could have just taken his money and ran, but there was part of him that needed to be the epicenter, that needed to be the fulcrum behind this entire self-created universe. He wanted to become the swashbuckler that he was always writing about, and he managed to convince, you know, thousands, could be said millions, that he was actually this figure. So he wrote himself into becoming a hero.
So in other words, it reminds me a little bit of the Seinfeld episode where George Costanza was telling incredible lies, and then he said to Jerry, what is it? It's not a lie if you believe it.
Right. The bigger the lie, the more people will believe it.
Yeah, I went along to an anonymous Scientology protest in Russell Street in Melbourne, and I took my camera and interviewed a few people. And my wife is always quite amazed because I've sort of filled her in little bits and pieces with Scientology and some of the things they believe and stuff. And she honestly looks at me and she goes, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. Who could believe this? Don't be. That's nuts. Now, come on. Why wouldn't people just walk away and leave this? What? You know?" And I said, "Look, it's amazing. Once people get into that loop and they believe, it's not so simple to just wander away from it." And she is always astounded when I tell her sort of the tenets of Scientology. She just goes, "Nobody could surely believe that." And I say, "You'd be amazed. You'd be amazed."
Well, I had that perspective for a while too, especially early on when I first started speaking about it. When you start really learning what they actually believe in terms of Xenu and evil galactic warlords and alien parasitic souls, you know, upon our bodies,
the Thetans,
all of this sort of crazy space opera to it. It also, the more and more I talk to people on and off the record about it, all the conversations that I've had, the people that I've met, of me fundamentally trying to understand, well, how did this work for you? Well, one thing that a lot of people need to get is that the very basic component of Scientology, past aliens and past all that, is electrified hypnosis. That you're basically you're paying someone, an auditor, to basically hold a lie detector that you believe reads your thoughts, that can read your past lives, and they're basically hypnotizing you. It's a guided hypnosis session. It's running a small electrical current to your body, and for a lot of people, it puts them in a trance-like state. And also, on top of that, as a basic component, it has this incredible hierarchy where there's always this dangling carrot, and there's a secret door that you're always trying to get to and always trying to pay a little extra to. So then it starts to become this kind of dog-eat-dog pressure of trying to rise in this organization that has this really dry and rigid hierarchy on top of these very fantastical elements. But the thing is that a lot of people need to understand is that Scientology is very different than other religions. If I hand you a Bible, we're done. You know, I'm like, here, go read that, save your soul. You know, you can go sit in a prison cell and read it. But Scientology, if I hand you one book and you read it, then I'm going to sell you another one, and then I'm going to sell you another one. There's always another level. There's always another step. There's always another secret that you need to buy. And that's the problem that they're running into now, is that L Ron is dead. There are no more secrets that can be created. It's totally accepted that L Ron was the only architect of this, that he was the only writer. He's the only person that is allowed to write about it and that is allowed to contribute to this text. So you have people who have been in there for 30, 40 years at this point, and the dangling carrot is still dangling, but there's no one else to add another step. There's no extra step to the bridge. There's no extra secret door for you to open. And so you're sort of left with this kind of bleak ending where you just kind of grind on these last steps and then go back and then redo them again, and then they send out the same texts that are revised. And, you know, so I mean, there's an aspect of that, and then there's also a very, very clever and really powerful method of manipulating people to not only snitch on each other, but also convincing yourself that if it's not working for you, like if you get to a point where you learn about the space aliens and Xenu, when you finally get to that level, if it doesn't work for you, then they have it built into the whole paradigm that there's something wrong with you.
That's right.
It's not just your doubt. And not only that, it's important to know that means that you have to, if you don't agree, that means you have to pay to do it again. And you have to keep paying to figure out what's wrong with you until you do it. Let me give you an example of a guy I met in Ireland. He was saying that in one of his earlier sessions, he never even got to clear state, this early on. Oh. So he's doing the electrified hypnosis, he's getting interrogated, and they ask him, and he goes through all of his crimes, because they're obsessed with crimes and dirt and Scientology, and all of your sexual fetishes and your sexual experiences. And then you believe that this e-meter can read your mind. And so they say, well, have you ever killed anybody? And he says, no, I haven't ever killed anybody. And they say, are you sure? And then they're looking at the e-meter. He's like, I'm sure I've never killed anybody. And they're like, well, do you have a block here? You have something there. So he said he actually had to dig through and sort of invent this past life where he had killed somebody in order for it to work. Because otherwise, they're just going to shut it down and be like, well, I'm sorry that you have a problem here, that you're not giving us full disclosure. You're not trying to advance. And so you put and he was almost, and as crazy as that sounds, like to us normal people, we'd be like, or whatever normal may be, but a lot of people would assume that, oh, well, I just get up and get out of there. But you're so far along in this point, and you want to advance yourself. It works in a very dangerous and seductive way of self-betterment. That's the thing, is these people aren't signing up to just lose their minds. They're signing up because they want to be better people. And, you know, I mean, I really believe that some people in the earlier stages especially have noble intentions. You know, they have noble intentions about themselves. They have noble intentions to help the world. And what happens, though, is that L Ron had to keep creating these steps and these secrets and these secret doors. He had to keep inventing the steps as he went on, because it wasn't creating superhuman beings with telekinetic powers. It was creating this sort of delusional mind frame where you have a lot of collective speak, you have a lot of collective thinking. They rewrite your vocabulary. You learn all this new terminology, so it even distances you from other people. I mean, it's very brilliantly executed, which is what's so horrifying about it when you meet people that have lost 30 years and their family members and hundreds of thousands of dollars to it, is to realize that it was all empty, that it's all a sham, is incredibly painful for these people to deal with.
Yeah, it is quite amazing. I remember when you first get approached on the street by the Scientologists, you'll say, you know, come and do the OCA, which is the Oxford Capacity Analysis Test, which has nothing to do with Oxford University whatsoever. And I know that as you keep redoing it, you know, you're prompted, why don't you fill it out the way that Ron would have done it? And it is true what you say about people. I mean, people seek praise, they seek the reward of succeeding. So I can understand when you're drawn into that, how much you do try and strive, you know, to please your masters. And it's interesting, as you say, with the auditor, the person who sits opposite you with the which is a Wheatstaff bridge, which is also now known as the E-meter, which was also stolen by L Ron. When you're telling people your most innermost secrets, and of course they're saying, oh, it's all very confidential, we promise this will never go any further. For a start,
which they own.
Yeah.
And there's no legal basis for it. There is no psychiatrist-client relationship. There is no priest protection from you. This goes in a filing cabinet. So if you want to leave, they got all of your dirt.
And the scary thing is that the auditor sitting opposite you often is not that much further advanced along the bridge, as it were, than you are, and they're donating their time in order to earn bonus credits to try and get themselves. So often they're as clueless as the person they're auditing. And that was the interesting thing. It was a bit like sort of the Nazi Germany thing where orders come from the top and then you keep people as scattered underneath you as possible, and no one needs to know any more than they need to know as they advance along, which is even more scary when you consider, as I say, that the auditor sitting across from you also doesn't know all the wherewithal, so they're being sort of led along as well. It is brilliant. I mean, if L Ron Hubbard had put this much effort into actually studying something that was worthwhile, he might have been an absolute genius. I mean, to have come up with this and yet to have flunked all the other stuff is amazing. In a bad way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I mean, the more I've thought about it and the more I've talked with people and really try to identify what is his motivation, because I think it's too easy to just say greed. You know, this is it's not just greed. It's not just mansions and cars and so forth. I mean, there's something about his ego that needed to devour this, that needed to be this all-powerful, you know, creation of himself. That, I mean, he was a writer and he wrote himself into this role, and he wrote himself away from his failures. He wrote himself from his secrets to a point where he was literally the fountain of all information that was needed to save the entire human civilization. And you have to imagine the ego of that. I mean, to completely freestyle all of it. I mean, he's jacking from all these different you know, theologies, these different sciences, and just kind of making this kind of crazy hodgepodge around it. But the way that he insulated himself, the way that he protected himself, the way that he created this entire, almost like secret police. I mean, as far as I know, Mormons don't have their own secret police force. You know what I mean? They don't have. I can't think of. Charles Manson never had a CIA, you know, group that just fuse and destroying their opponents. You know, David Koresh didn't have like a secret black ops. You know what I mean? Like pseudo secret spy agents. I mean, there hasn't been a religion that's infiltrated and broken into many different government institutions and, you know, on a scale much larger than Watergate. And, I mean, there hasn't been a religion like that. There hasn't been a cult like that. And partly it's because of everything that he created, everything that fascinated with him, and his own sort of kind of deeper, you know, dirty, dark obsessions, you know, with subterfuge, with blackmail, with destruction, you know, and how to make people destroy themselves. You know, I mean, it's like Scientology has never really openly just killed anybody, but what they do is often way worse. So they try to basically have people destroy themselves. Yeah. Or they put in everything in motion where they try to destroy like their very character and assassinate them and just completely just make them a shell of what they were. And that's what's so dangerous about him.
Well, that's I guess.
You know, I mean,
I was going to say they have to break you to make you, basically.
Right.
And I mean there have been casualties along the way. I mean, Lisa McPherson is probably the most high-profiled, where there was a girl who was obviously suffering some very deep psychological and you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Not just psychological, but I mean she had psychiatric problems, and of course their neglect and refusal to really help her, so they basically left her in a room, and by the time she was really too far gone, someone finally drove her miles away to a hospital and left her dumped there because of you know, because of Scientology's refusal to accept. I mean, I can understand why they're terrified of psychiatrists, because when you really know the real tenets of Scientology, you think I'd be frightened of psychiatrists too.
Well, a lot of it is that L Ron had an eternal grudge against psychiatry because they were one of the first people to really attack him. When Dianetics first came out, it wasn't postulated as a religion. No, it was actually advertised itself constantly as a science, and you still even see that now in their infomercials. It's like I don't really believe that a lot of them believe it's a religion either. It's that they view it as this is the most efficient science that the world has ever seen. They want to replace psychiatry.
Well, that's the hook.
And psychiatry is an easy target. I mean, like, I certainly don't support Ritalin or electroshock or lobotomies, and these are easy targets. But that's the thing, is that that's their model they're trying to replace. The auditor is basically a psychiatrist. The same money rates that they're saying that need to be paid, these thousands of dollars, they compare to intensive psychiatric counseling. And that's sort of their model. And when Dianetics came out, and the psychiatric community was the first people to come after him and say, well, if this is a science, where's your evidence? And that was when he basically transformed it into a religion. Because he knew if you protected it in a religion, that people like myself, or any critic of the church for that matter, that they can just classify and throw into this dustbin of that you're a fascist, or
you're
not
heretic,
allowing me to have my beliefs. You're a zealot. I mean, one of their favorite comparisons is to call people Nazis and so forth, which even carries over from L. Ron's obsessions early on.
Which is interesting, yes. Because I was going to say, I mean, my first brush with the Scientology, the church, was basically, I mean, the thing that they've got is that first you push Dianetics, which is then more or less said, well, you don't have to be a member of Scientology. This is a self-help thing. This is a productive thing. And, of course, that's the hook that gets a lot of people in, because most human beings, no matter how confident we are, we all have some sort of doubt in ourselves, and that is the hook they exploit. And, they are looking for the people who have, I guess, more self-doubt. My brush with them was going off and doing the OCA test, and then I actually dared to criticize it when the person said, well, you have a mistrust of strangers and all this sort of stuff. And I said, well, of course I do. I don't know you from a bar of soap. To be quite honest, this test I've taken with your so-called multiple answers really often asks questions that the multiple answers don't really answer. So, I'm choosing, I guess, the best one that fits it. But that's not, in my opinion, sort of, this is all a bit of a trap. And I got into a big argument with him, and he just got up and walked away, and they left me at the desk sitting there, surrounded the girlfriend that I had at the time, and then told her, you've got to leave this guy. He's really bad for you. And I remember thinking they didn't know whether we were married, whatever. And here they are. Here is this church already trying to break us up. What church does that? And then, of course, that was years before the internet. And I always thought, you've sort of made an enemy out of me in a way, because one day I will find out more about you. And thanks to Xenu.net, the Operation Clambake site, I did find out more. And, of course, I suppose I'm glad in a way I did speak out, and I dared to, when the guy said, oh, but these are the words of the great L Ron Hubbard, and I more or less said, they sound like a load of bullshit, and the look on their face was like, what? How dare you say that about him? So they really didn't want me, so I was kind of happy about that, really. But,
Right.
So I was going to say, okay, so you're a child. How do they first break this information to you? Your parents said, sat you down one day and said, we want to tell you about great-grandpappy. What was your reaction when you first heard all this?
I mean, a fair amount of this is referred to in the piece that's on YouTube, which is called The God and the Man, which I did for Snap Judgment for NPR, which is a radio storytelling show and television show out here in America. And, one of the lines from it is that in a house the self-made God paid for, he was the one God we never gave grace to. And a lot of it was that when I was young, I was the first child. My mother was L. Ron Hubbard Jr.'s first child, and I was her first child, so I was the oldest of the children. And I also had a natural affinity towards writing even when I was young. I would just write constantly. I did really well in English. I got a lot of, gifted awards and went to writing camps and so forth. And, I remember my grandfather telling me and showing me a lot of L. Ron Hubbard's books. Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, your great-grandfather was a writer too. It runs in your blood. And he's like, and nobody talked to me about Scientology. That was the dark black sheep of the family. Nobody wanted to go there. I mean, it had just destroyed lives. And as my mom views it, is that she says now, she says everything about that church is toxic. Mm-hmm. It's poison. It's poison everybody it's come into contact with. She views it that she lost her grandfather and her father to the same cult. Mm-hmm. That she lost, I mean, these are real people. These are, that's her grandfather, is a man who's in hiding, a man who's, become a self-designated god. And, his son had to live in that shadow. I mean, who knows how my life would have been different, how I would have been raised differently if that wasn't the case. But it took me a lot of investigation on my own to learn more about it. I was raised really kind of fanatically Baptist Christian by my mom, and like super hardcore. I remember passing out pamphlets about the apocalypse and Armageddon and the whore of Babylon and the Antichrist on street corners when I was young. And in my early days, this is obviously way before the internet, I would start coming across these books about cults that were, for Christians to identify all of these dangerous cults. And Scientology kept getting listening to it. And I was like, hey, wait a minute, what is this? And I would start asking my relatives about it, and without going into a lot of detail, because none of them will talk about it on the record, and they've asked me specifically not to make reference to who or what or who said what. Yeah. But they started revealing more of it to me in terms of like, okay, now that you're older, this is the dark creation this is the abomination that he made, and this is what it did. And I knew, though, that from an early age, never to bring that up around my grandfather, L Ron Hubbard Jr., because it would just set him off. At that point, he was really sick. He had been hounded by him for decades. He'd basically been at war with his father for most of his life, and then when he tried to bring the truth about his father to light, then the church came after him with knives out. Yeah. And, I mean, they hounded him pretty much until the day he died. I mean, he actually ended up having to change his name. He moved constantly, and it was just a large shadow. It was a large stain. It was like you can imagine if your great-grandfather was a bank robber or a killer or, someone like that, where it's like, if a kid in the family has this kind of extra fascination for him, but also me and my brother were the only two redheads in the family, so there was some concern that we were carrying a lot of his genetics, and certainly me and my brother were just hellacious troublemakers our entire lives, and both of us were incredibly manic for many years, and we just had an extra dose of whatever L Ron had. I mean, if mental illness is real, and L Ron Hubbard was mentally ill, and some of that stuff is still in my blood. It's still in my DNA. And, I mean, I'm a performer. I put on shows. I've been accused of being a cult leader in some ways for the show that I put on and create, though. I sort of put on a cult of individuality, and which is more of a confrontational opposition to groupthink and so forth.
Well, I was going to say, from what I've seen of you, you are very charismatic. That is the thing. When I first saw your YouTube site where you did talk about that, you are quite mesmerizing, which is fantastic for someone on stage. It is fantastic. It's not a bad attribute to have. It's just what you actually choose to do with it. And I did see that. I mean, for years I'm a musician, entertainer myself. Getting a little longer in the tooth, and I've seen a lot of stand-up acts in my time, and I've seen people who can stand on a stage and absolutely mesmerise an audience. And when I watched you from that link, I did have to say, this guy has got, he has the mesmerising. You've got the Kevorkian, you know what I mean? You've got it. It's there.
Well, thank you. Runs in the family, I guess. I mean. That's the thing, and that's one of the reasons actually why I got the Scientology tattoo. It was actually a reminder to me of what happens when artists go wrong. Mm-hmm. Is that these same powers of charisma, these same powers of having the guts and the sort of balls and bravado to do any kind of art or make a film or make a show and have hundreds and thousands of people, watch your work and listen to your words. Well, it depends ultimately on what is your motivation. If my motivation is only to feed my ego and to feed my wallet and not to leave something behind that's actually transcendent and, helps people or shows another kind of perspective, and that can bring potentially illuminating a lot of the dark corners of your own life for entertainment or for redemption or whatnot. It's just a different purpose. And I mean, it made me realize that there's a lot of things I can write in this lifetime. There's a lot of things you can do with your powers. And I've always been a firm believer in the power of one. And L Ron certainly taught me that as well, that, you know, any one person can change the world. And all it takes is simply the bravado to do it, to the dedication and the kind of furious, stubborn obstinacy that it takes to just mold reality. And I think artists do that all the time. If you want to make a film, you have an idea, you have a concept, and then you literally manifest it. You write it, and then you find people to inhabit these roles. You make sure that the technology is there to capture it. You edit it. You carve it. You create something out of nothing, out of thin air. And he always became sort of a warning sign to me. He became something to heed about the dangers of that. And you can use your powers for good or bad. I mean, it's like the, Spider-Man maxim, with great power comes responsibility.
Yep.
And I realized that, I don't want to enslave people. I would rather inspire people or cause controversy and debate and conversation and, laughter and so forth. I mean, that I don't want to play. Like, if you're a performer, you're basically puppeteering an audience a lot of the time into laughter, to tears, or to applause and exhilaration. Mm-hmm. And, a preacher does the same thing, but they motivate them to, bend to their will.
Yes.
And that's very different. That's a lot of what L Ron was constantly doing, is bending you to his will, to adopting his vocabulary, to adopting his fantastical biography and completely invented theology that he made up out of thin air. And that was it. There was a constant campaign of that. And so that, to me, is always the danger that's inherent in anybody who has great powers of communication or just like an extra spark. And, my brother is a year younger than me, and whatever the mania that L Ron had, my brother absolutely has going on. I mean, I'm not, many people would, he's been diagnosed with manic depressive several times. He's certainly not psychotic, but I mean, he's one of the most hyper individuals I've ever met. And he's a good example of just like how kind of genetics fuse into, your powers and what you do with it. And for him, he's been trying to dull the blade for many years. It's very hard for him to go to sleep. It's hard for him to stay concentrated on specific subjects because he has so much energy and his brain is so fast and he's so incredibly charismatic. But he hasn't, quite totally found the direction on where he wants to aim it. When he does, that it's going to be like a full force explosion on it because he has so much extra energy than most people just walking the planet. And that, to me, is interesting to see all the different kind of facets of where this kind of energy and this force of will, where it can go when it's, when you suck it in and you don't explode it onto the world, and it sort of eats you out from the inside.
Right.
But if you explode it onto the world, you have to be very careful with what you do with that and what are the consequences.
Well, I wish him a lot of luck, because I imagine it must be a sort of a prison for one, that it can be quite torturous. The question I would ask you now is, okay, so far with what you've achieved, are you satisfied with the way things are going in terms of you getting your message out?
I think that when I first performed against him, which was in 2000, and I first performed a piece about it, and I wrote it very quickly, and it was this whole long, sort of rambly, messy, epic, lame. I mean, I'm not very proud of it these days, but that it was just this sort of long, incoherent, rambly thing because I was trying to say too much in one piece. And then I ended up going to Clearwater after that and actually seeing just the huge totality and the actual fearsome size of the cult itself. Like being in Clearwater, where they have hundreds of security cameras downtown, they have these huge super buildings, their own bus line, their own costume militia, being followed by security, being followed by cameras. It made me realize that I didn't want to dedicate my life to just battling this, that I have a lot more to say, a lot more to do. And it was really only about in the last year that piece I wrote, the piece that I wrote came about simply because it had always sort of bothered me that I hadn't really cracked on how I wanted to approach it artistically. And to me, I define myself as an artist, not as an activist. So to me, it's more about how do I make something that is transcendent, that has a certain power to it, that's more than me just like rattling off a bunch of crazy, dirty secrets of Scientology, which I'm more than happy to do in interviews and when someone puts a microphone in my face, because it has become more than just like a bit of dark family trivia for me. I mean, meeting victims of the cult, meeting people who've had their entire lives, bank accounts, their sanity shattered, it made me realize that what I do say is important. And that right now is such a tumultuous period in the church's history because they're almost having almost like a Protestant Reformation happening within their own church, with people like Marty Rathburn and stuff who are leaving the church, who was the number 2 and 3 guys, and they're actually doing Scientology. They still believe in L Ron, but now they're putting all the bullseyes and all the target and all the derision and blame on David Miscavige, who's a very convenient target and really just doesn't have the same charisma and swagger of L Ron, and never really claimed to. He runs it like a hard-nosed CEO.
Yeah, he
does.
Claim
to be. Yeah, he doesn't claim. He didn't try to replace L Ron as much as he's like, I'm the bulldog that's going to maintain and make this militaristic model of efficiency to grow this church, to invest this money, to put these products out there constantly. But now he's having a lot of problems because it's like it's this carnivorous cycle. And because there's no L Ron's dead and there's no one else to add more steps, there's no extra levels. You can't keep going, past OT level 8. It's like there's nothing really to keep progressing. So where do you go with it? If you're promising people are going to be superhuman, godlike, sentient beings, well, at a certain point, if you have a moment of realization, a moment of clarity that that's not the case, then you're going to start looking back on your life and you're going to start seeing for the ugly truths for what it is. And especially because a lot of his own internal kind of power mechanizations on his own people and punishments and these rehabilitation project force and these crazy prison camps and all this sort of internal persecution. Well, it's making a lot of people leave in droves. But what's happening, though, is that those people are leaving, but now they have a safer refuge through people like Marty Rathburn, but now they can blame David Miscavige, still hold on to the vestiges of, in the tech, as they call it, that it still works for them, still hold on to some of their beliefs, but then shuffle all the blame and all of the ugliness onto David Miscavige and make it his fault.
Yeah.
Well, for some of them, it's almost like a gateway drug out. They're able to sort of ease themselves through it. And I mean, like what I challenge to a lot of people who are still, in these new sort of Scientologist movement, they call like free zone and the new Scientologists and stuff like that, is that I'm like, if this stuff works, if you really think it works, well, like, let's prove it. Let's prove it. Let's prove it to the public. Let's fess up and admit that, L Ron was a crazy con man. But if he Thomas Edison was a dick. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people can accept that, but we still use light bulbs. You know what I mean? Like, if you think that L Ron gave us great technology and you think that past the man transcends that, well, let's prove it. If you want to help the world, you want to save people, you want to make better people, you want to give them these gifts, well, then let's figure out a way of doing that, but even potentially for free. Not charge them thousands of dollars and not force feed them the same hook, line, and sinker, and not feed him this phantom of a man that L Ron presented himself. And, I mean, he's really the poison in the well. And if you can't remove him from the entire theology, then it's hard for me to accept that any of it has any kind of scientific or validity basis whatsoever. It's like if it's a whole house of cards.
Well, it's like any religion. I mean, it all is, to quote religion, it is all built on sand. And I'm sure, if you held up any of L Ron Hubbard's tech sort of things, if they were double-blind tested and all of that stuff, it'd be found to be as big a load of bullshit as anything else. So, I mean,
to be fair, Christianity, which I grew up in, of course, they don't have to prove a damn thing because the whole payoff is when you die.
Yeah, that's right.
That's it. So I don't have to promise you. I don't have to guarantee anything because the day you die, that's when it's all supposed to kick in and prove me right.
That's right.
And ain't nobody coming back from that. So the problem is with Scientology is you're supposed to experience it this lifetime. And so you experience it through these trance-like hypnotic, sessions, or you're supposed to experience these telekinetic powers and the powers to move space and time in this same fleshy mortal coil. And that's sort of the problem, is that you know, it's this bait and switch, and it's this you know, pyramid scam, but it's easily disproven. You know, unless it's like, you know, and they still have stuff to answer doubts of like, well, if it's not true for you, then whatever's true is true for you, as their maxim. And that's very convenient. It's very convenient logic. It's the same convenient logic as faith. You know, and like, well, it doesn't matter if your logical mind wrestles against this or whatever did actually happen in reality, like the Nicene Council or, you know, anything like that. They can all be disregarded because you got to have faith. You know, and Scientology still has those logical loopholes to excuse any of these things where your brain starts to itch up and say, well, hey, wait a minute. You know, and so, I mean, to me, to kind of fully answer that question is that I'm more interested in what I would like to do with it artistically. I do have a project in mind that is on a larger scale that's going to address a lot of the larger issues involved in this. And I'll talk more about that when it comes up.
Well, the thing is, too, I mean, Scientology would have people flocking in droves to it if Tom Cruise came out and, say, levitated a set of keys across a stage with his mind, or opened up a porthole in the meshed universe as it was, matter, energy, space and time, and jumped in and out of it and dragged Oprah out of there. I'm sure every one of us would flock to it and say he's the real deal. You know, but you never see any of that. All you do is hear about it. But let's face it, if they could really do that, none of them would have the personal problems that they all have. Right. Because most of, like, the Scientology celebs that go to the segregated part of Scientology where the celebrity centers are, most of them come across as being absolutely screwed up. Is pretty much how, I mean, Tom Cruise jumping on and off the couch with Oprah and all this sort of stuff, I don't think did Scientology any great favours. Before that, I mean, Tom Cruise was an absolute heartthrob, and kind of overnight he sort of just turned into a joke.
Well, he actually, I mean, I think that's part of the problem. I mean, is that before he was kind of held as their golden mascot, but the problem that happened is that as that's progressed into the future over the point of his career, is it just became actually a liability, which is a really quick and interesting turnaround. And now there's not a lot of other celebrities that want to be in the target for that, because right now it's sort of a media feeding frenzy, which is partly why, you know, I've gotten so many requests for interviews lately. It's partly why, you know, ABC is hitting me up and so forth, is because a lot of them smell blood in the water. I mean, this was a subject that nobody wanted to approach for years because they were hit with a battery of lawsuits. Their reporters would get followed. Their reporters would have surveillance and, you know, people following them. I mean, you know, just really nasty, dirty tricks.
Yeah, well, the British Panorama show was like that, Yeah, exactly.
And so a lot of people were like, no way, it's not even worth it. You know what I mean? It's like, this is absolutely dangerous. But a lot of, you know, media, you know, programs and reporters have actually, you know, had a lot of balls and going after him full force and doing a lot of these exposés. And now that with a lot of these ex-members and their you know, PR, public relations spokesmen, you know, actually coming out and standing against the church as well, it's made more of an open field day. I mean, this guy, you know, in the Village Voice, I mean, he's just like roasting him every single day. You know, every single day, this guy just has an open war against the church. And so, I mean, they're getting hit from every which way and every which side, and that's not helping Tom Cruise at all. I mean, you're not hearing a lot from John Travolta right now. You're not going to hear much from Kirstie Alley. They're all trying to dodge it at this point. I'm sure a lot of them, if you still ask them about it, they're going to say something positive. But I mean, I think even the church itself now is realizing that this is a problem. You know, that they got too many holes in the ship. So what are they going to try to do? And I think what they're really terrified about is this idea of people trying to do Scientology for free. I think that's what scares them more than any of their critics.
Oh, for sure. I mean, look, the greatest you know, nail in the coffin for Scientology was the internet, because pre the internet, people just couldn't find out stuff. Correct. And then once those secret doctrines got on there, and then people started telling their own tales, and even though the church tried to put web filters on their parishioners' computers and stuff, you know, basically once that snowball started rolling, there was nothing they could do. And harping back to the auditing, you know, when you tell the auditor all your deep dark secrets, and John Travolta. How much mud can be thrown at John Travolta with the allegations of him being gay and all this? I look at him, and it's only my opinion because I don't know shit from clay, basically, but I look at him and think, just my opinion, I think to myself, he'd probably love to be a million miles away from it, but he's now been involved with it for so long, and there's so much sort of, I guess, known about him behind closed doors, just my opinion, mind you, don't sue, just my opinion, that he's kind of trapped, which is why half the time I think he just closes his mouth and sort of just lets it all play out around him.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, I've talked to people who used to be in the church when he was around, and I won't go into a lot of the allegations that they said, but other than just the fact that some of these current allegations have been ongoing and have been problems before. And they said that, the Army of Scientology's lawyers would handle a lot of that dissent, would handle leaks. And I don't think he's going to be able to escape, really, at this point.
No, I mean,
so. They protected him for too long. It would be too huge of a blow. His wife is also a Scientologist.
Yeah.
I mean, he's another one of their golden child. It's just that he's just not as crazily passionate as Tom Cruise is. So he's been in it. He has more of a sort of gentle celebrity persona. He's not he's not getting in people's faces like Matt Lauer, and he's just grilling him. And that was what started to turn things over. When people started to see how dedicated Tom Cruise was, you can call it fanaticism, but I mean, just his absolute pure-minded dedication. I mean, Tom Cruise is obviously a very intense guy, and his intensity in talking about stuff that people don't understand is also what really started to turn it. So,
can I just ask, have you been stalked? Have you been stalked? Have you been hunted down by the cult yourself? Like what?
Yeah, when I first performed about him in 2000, and it was put on the internet, they came immediately to my door. So they actually had a cover story that they were performers doing a show with me. This is how they found out where I lived, because I was actually in between houses. And they showed up with this cover story and basically tried to, get me alone, I guess. And then they managed to confront my mom. And my mom could tell who they were right away because she, had an idea what shows I was doing. And so she was like, who are you? And they're like, well, do you know that that he's claiming to be the great-grandson of L Ron Hubbard? And she says, yeah, you're talking to his granddaughter right now. And they're taken aback by that because I don't think they're actually prepared for that. It probably wasn't in their preparatory dossier when they're gathering data. And after that, there was a lot of people telling me that people have been following me, that they've been asking around in different cafes and just like weird, shady circumstances. So I'm not stupid. I know that I'm pretty positive. I'm sure they know where I live. I'm not hard to find. I'm going to hide in the spotlight, I guess.
Yeah, hide in plain sight. Yeah, I mean, look, that's probably the way to go. And really, I mean, of course, the ridiculousness of it is with them digging up the so-called dirt on people. I mean, I know they come out with outright lies about people, but every one of us, we're all strange in our own way. And really, when you sort of look at some of the threats they throw on people and what they threaten to expose you for in this day and age, half the time you're more likely to say, well, just go and do your worst. I mean, who cares? I mean, it's a freaky world out there, you know what I mean? Like, what can you really say about me that's,
I'm pretty difficult to character assassinate when on any given show I might put squid down my pants for a laugh.
Exactly.
And then be teaching high school kids in a juvenile detention center the next day. I mean, my entire life is utterly bizarre and hasn't been lived towards trying to make some conscientious image. It's just I fly my freak flag quite high.
Yeah.
So whether it's about sexuality or violence or anything else. I mean, I got a film about me wanting to kill people in high school because I'm upfront. I'm honest about these things, and Scientology is the same thing. I mean, it's just turning the spotlight on anything people want to hide within themselves and in the world.
So I don't want to offend you, but I mean, you could be making a killing out of this whole thing, really, when you think about it. I mean, you could be like the Pied Piper and draw all these Scientologists over to you and get them to give you their money to you. You know, you could say, look, I'm him, I'm back, my Thetan has gone off to the Van Allen belt. I've gone 3 times around Jupiter. I've gone to see Xenu. We've shaken hands. We've settled it down. And look at me. I look just like him. Why give them the money? I can give you OT9 for our newbies out there. Each OT level is what you climb up the so-called bridge for. By the time you get to OT3, they tell you about Xenu, the warlord. But you know, you could say, right, I'm about to ride OT9. Come on over. I mean, I can sell you snake oil.
All I need to do is gain a little weight, wear an ascot, and buy me a pack of cool cigarettes.
Oh yeah,
and I think I might have a shot.
Yeah, so I mean, I mean, I don't look. Far be it from me to tell you how to run your business, but there's money in there, them there hills, boy. There's money. Now, I was going to say, so nowadays, do you have any religious belief whatsoever, or is it all sheer bunkum as far as you're concerned?
Absolute zero. I'm not going to spend any more time this life speculating about some afterlife that no one has experienced is going to hand to me on a plate. I mean, I grew up Baptist Christian. I had to deprogram myself pretty much single-handedly from Christianity. I then learned more and more about my great-grandfather who created his own religion in our lifetime, and it kind of makes me a little skeptical that anybody out there has any sort of an answer. It's all sort of, you know, I mean, I don't worry about death. I don't worry about the afterlife. I don't believe in absolute morality. I believe that you define your own life. I believe you define your own meaning, and I think I might just take up believing in the Greek gods again and give them another run for their money.
Why not?
You know, I think Zeus and Hades, I think they got a bad shake, and I happen to be a fan of Clash of the Titans. So I think I'm going to put my money on that. And the Greeks gave a lot to the world and gave us quite a bit of brilliant philosophy and culture. So I think I'm going to take it old school and just start believing in the gods.
Okay, can you tell us at the moment in terms of, so you do a bit of stand-up comedy, that's correct?
Yeah, I do quite a bit, but I run a show called Tourette's Without Regrets that you can find online.
Yes.
I'm also a filmmaker, so I got a feature film called Smoke that's coming out next month about a cannabis club robbery. It's a very dark comedy. And then I'm constantly performing. I do stand-up. I'll actually be doing a lot more stand-up probably in the next year. And, so yeah, I do a lot of films, music videos, performances, live stuff. I'm a pretty wacky individual.
Yeah, well,
so you can find out more at jamiedewolf.com.
It's been it's been really good talking to you. As I said, from the first time I saw you, I thought I'd love to have a chat to this fellow. I'm disappointed with the Scientologists for not declaring me one of their suppressive persons, because years ago I came up with
You'll get there.
I came up with the song "Old Mother Hubbard," which was MUTHU. And put it on YouTube, and I acted your great-grandpappy himself. It's on my YouTube site, and I thought, you know, if I put this about, I'm sure I'm going to end up on one of those lists, and I always check the lists from the Scientology site where it's, religiousfreedom.org, and I keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and, you know, I don't think they're that bothered by me, and it really bugs me. I've got to tell you, it bugs me! Look,
Meanwhile, I'm going to get karate chopped by Tom Cruise in my neck next time I answer the door, I'm sure. So, yeah, just keep trying, my man. Just keep striving. Keep going up the bridge, and you'll get there.
Well, I know all the secrets now, so it's too late. I've got them all for free, but they really didn't. I was supposedly going to be struck down with bronchitis and pneumonia because it said if you read the OT3 and find out about Xenu, the evil space lord, and you haven't done all the other steps, you will almost be struck dead. So I was a little hesitant about it, but I forged on, and I'm still here, and I'm still okay. Excuse me for a minute. Look, Jamie, I'd love to keep in touch with you. You've got my detail things there. So if anything big happens, or you want anything else you want to get off your chest, please do feel free to message me at any time, and I'd always open up a microphone for you, okay?
All right, will do. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on. It's been fantastic.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
All righty. Bye, Australia.
Well, there he was, Jamie DeWolf. I'm absolutely over the moon. Podcast 4, and such a good guest. Oh, I'm totally enlightened after that.
Oh, yes, Jamie, sir, grovel. Had to work in your own little bit, didn't you? Oh, I've done something on YouTube. Oh, aren't we bloody teachers' pet?
Well, you don't think for a minute I was going to let you ask him anything? He'd have hung up. I mean, who could blame the guy? He's not ready for some sort of septic cleaning. I mean, he lives in a civilised part of the world, Nev. They've got probably sewers there.
Oh, sewers, they're doing me out of my bloody income, they are. There's too much of this going on in the world, this proper plumbing. No wonder me truck's so old. You going to play me bloody episode or what?
Well, I've been right up to my neck in it, and I'm never in a flurry. I'm Nev from Nangwarry. I don't know. Yeah, no, that's who I am. Yeah, no.
Oh, there you are, Porter. Yes, just wheel him over. I think Dr. Snitzer Group is ready for him now. Well, it's a most unusual case, you know that, nurse, don't you? He spent 3 days, this poor soul did, in the car park at Mount Shank. Then he drove his truck to Badenoch, took all their ice cream out and started building a huge, well, it looked like a volcano. All you'll say is, Slim Dusty, Slim Dusty, Slim Dusty and the lights.
Yeah, wheel him in. I'm ready for him now. How is the young nephew, you know, the boy?
Well, we found him at home, sir. He was all crumpled up and hiding in the cupboard under the kitchen sink. He was babbling and incoherent, so we looked up his file. Apparently for him, that's not unusual, so I don't think it's affected him at all, no.
Ha! Schnitzel, okay, leave him with me. Now, Neville, can you hear me? Neville? Hello, Neville?
Dusty in the lights.
Yeah, whatever. I am going to hypnotize you now, Neville. If you have a very high IQ, it can take an awful long time to hypnotize. Oh, I think you're under. Now we will get to the bottom. Neville, what happened to you 4 days ago? Tell me.
And that's why, young Jason, Slim Dusty's The Lights on the Hill is the best song ever written.
Oh, yeah, I see, Uncle Ned, but it doesn't really techno, though, does it? No.
Techno, I'll give you techno. Have you found it on the cassette yet? Go on, give it a thump, make it work.
Yeah, I tried that, Uncle Ned, but all it keeps making is a funny crackling sound.
Yeah, well, thump it again. Yeah, well, those lights are bright, aren't they? They're not coming over the hill. They're above us. Jason, what is that?
UFO, Uncle Ned.
Hey, don't be so bloody rude. I'm only asking a fair question.
Did you hear that? I think they're trying to communicate with us, Uncle Ned.
Right, well, I'll try and communicate back. Here we go. Jason, we're out of the truck. We're floating. I'm a bit scared, Jason.
Oh, me too, Uncle Ned. I'm glad I wore me brown pants.
I've never thought I'd say this, Jason, but hold me hand for reassurance, will you? Hey, Jason, since when did you have 6 clammy little fingers on your hand?
Ah!
Have the 2 individuals been strapped in and probed the way I asked number 2? Yes, I'm right to say no, but we found no evidence of brains in either the cranial or anal parts of their bodies. Let me see them. And there's been some sort of mistake. I said get 2 workable members of the species. I'm sorry, original powerful one. I thought I said get 2 workmen who deal with feces. Erase their memories and return them at once. It's not my fault I'm 19. I didn't want any posted to this crap part of the universe anyway. I haven't had planet leave in over 6 million light years. And when I get home, I'm going to complain to the union.
Well, I've been right up to my neck in it, and I'm never in a flurry. I'm Nev from Nangwarry. I don't know. Yeah, no, that's who I am. Yeah, no.
Play it again.
We just played the episode.
No, not the episode.
Nev.
No, the bloody jingle. Play it again.
Oh, no, please. There it was, episode 7-ish of Nev from Nangwarry with a little tribute to Douglas Adams at the end.
Who again?
At the end of what? I don't know, but we are at the end
End of me bloody channel.
Yes, we are at
Come
the
on,
end
play
of
it,
this
play
podcast.
It, play it,
And there'll be
play
another
it.
one soonish
Play it,
because
play
I
it,
had other
play
stuff
it,
and I've got other
play
things
it,
and
play
bits
it,
and
play
pieces. Yes,
Play
all right.
Play it, play it, play it. Play it, play it, play
See,
it.
when you take the devil's money, you can't shake the devil's hand and say you're only kidding.
Oh, yeah.
They might be giants. They were a good band, weren't they? And still are. And I'll see you next time with more, I promise, with more. So much more. Well, I know I'm going down George Raab territory now, aren't I? Like 2 things more. Hey, good on you, George. Love George. Good bloke. Oh, and I must remember, at some point, Jake Farwharton's going to stick his head in on one of my podcasts. He is from Imaginary Friends. Another good bloke.
Give me a minute.
Yeah, I hear.
That's the 1 minute promo.
Yep.
Nev Septic Sucking Service.
Yep.
Dumb Down Atheist Podcast.
No, not podcast, son. It's for the wireless. You think small. That's your problem. All right, give us the oi. Go on.
Okay, counting up from 10. You ready? 10, 9, 8.
Oh, bloody shut up and start the thing, will you? A number 1, a number 2, and a 3, and a 4. If your bathroom's on the blink, don't squeeze it down the sink. When I'm pumping out your dunny, I'm in the land of milk and honey. I'll take away your waste, and I'll do it at great haste. All Nev Septic Sucking Services. Is the crapper all backed up? Well, you found a piece of luck. She's got a big tank as my Sheila, my beloved Bedford truck. I'll remove that nasty stink much faster than you think. Call Nev Septic Sucking Services. I discount for cash, I'll have you flushing in a flash. Don't clench up your ass, 'cause all things come to pass. If it's lumpy or it's runny, I'm the man who'll fix your dunny. Call Nev Septic Sucking Services. Watson versus Grothy in Elevator Gate. Both crack the shits and it don't smell too great. The Pope or Desmond Tutu can find themselves in doo-doo. Call Nev Septic Sucking Services. That's Nev Septic Sucking Services. You need Nev Septic Sucking Services. Oh, Nev Septic Sucking Services. Oh, it sucks to be me. I'm the plunger-lunger for all you skeptics with septics.